Tonight, we investigate $165,000 in gifts and free travel, trips to some of the world's most exotic locations for the president of one of the state's most powerful regulators.
We should note this is all legal, but is it right? Let's bring in our chief investigative reporter, Tony Kovaleski. Tony, you've been tracking this story for months. What do you have tonight for us?
Rajanelle, a very interesting paper trail here. Tonight, Michael Peavy is back in the public spotlight. He was appointed by the governor and paid by every ratepayer in California. We want to know, well, on your payroll, is he selling access to one of the most powerful offices in the state?
You poor son of a bitch, you got a job to do,
sir,
and it's pathetic that what you're doing.
Okay.
You might remember Michael Peavy.
What's the message you sent by coming here to Napa instead of going to speak to the Senate?
You're very antagonistic.
He wasn't fond of our questions after we found him at a day-long, all-expense-paid trip at an exclusive Napa resort and winery.
Mr. Peavy? Tony Kovaleski, you have a moment? Just a couple questions for you.
And he wasn't pleased to see us in Sacramento, where we questioned his decision to accept a safety award from union lobbyists less than 3 years after the San Bruno explosion.
Will you answer my question, sir? Sir,
I find you extremely insulting.
So how will the president of the Public Utilities Commission respond to the questions uncovered in these documents? Records filed with the state show since 2007, Michael Peavy has accepted more than $165,000 in gifts and free travel. In fact, records obtained by the NBC Bay Area Investigative Unit have found in the last 6 years, President Peavy has accepted 16 trips, each valued at more than $6,000.
International Terminal A.
This time last week, I was in China.
Trips to Hong Kong and Sweden.
Last week, I spent a week in Germany.
Globetrotting to Germany, Spain, and Israel.
I get the award, I think in the last month, perhaps in the last year, for traveling the farthest. Although the press is not up on all my travels.
But President Peavy may have spoken a bit too soon. We also know about his big-ticket trips, $12,500 for a 2010 excursion to Sydney, Australia.
I spent last week in Australia, a guest of the Total Environment Center.
Then there was this $13,000 all-expense-paid trip in 2008 to New Zealand. In 2009, $14,000 for another trip to Spain. And in 2007, Michael Peavy accepted nearly $15,000 in travel for a trip to South Africa.
Clearly, it is legal. The question is, of course, is it ethical? And there's a big difference between the two.
He's one of California's premier experts in government ethics. We showed the travel records to Bob Stern.
It always raises questions to me when we have such extensive travel. I don't think that private groups should be providing travel for public officials.
That's right. Private groups and some nonprofits are picking up the tabs for the travel. Some might call it a loophole. It's a state law allowing special interest groups, lobbyists, and executives special access to power brokers like Michael Peavy.
It's wherever a commissioner wants to go, anywhere in the world, all expenses paid, except for every step of the way, you're with a gaggle of lobbyists lobbying you.
Loretta Lynch had Peavy's job. She served as president of the Public Utilities Commission from 2000 to 2002.
so you were offered trips like this?
Absolutely.
What did you say?
No.
Why?
It's improper. It creates at least the appearance of impropriety. And I know what happens at those trips.
And here's a stark contrast. During Lynch's 5 years on the commission, including 2 as president, her gifts and travel totaled only about $6,000, or about $1,200 each year. Peavy's $165,000 during the past 6 years averages out to more than $27,000 per year.
Well, it's exponentially more than what I took as president of the PUC. What that says to me is he's being wined and dined on lobbyist dimes.
Out of President Peavy's 16 most expensive free trips, 6 were bankrolled by
The California Foundation, the Environment and the Economy.
CPUC is a nonprofit organization that receives large donations from many of the utilities and energy companies Peavy regulates, the same group that sponsored this conference earlier this year in Napa.
You spent time with the utilities you're paid to regulate.
There's no utilities here that I know of.
PG&E was here. We saw that on the list.
One person, I don't know.
CPUC sent President Peavy to New Zealand, Ireland, Italy, Spain, China, and South Africa in the past 6 years. Total cost, nearly $64,000 from one nonprofit group.
It's an invidious advantage that the companies who can pay have. And as a commissioner, you are supposed to look only at the facts in front of you and not who you went golfing with or on safari with or who paid for your $300 dinner last night.
Well, the law needs to be changed. Until the law is changed, public officials are going to keep taking these trips.
Mr. Peavy has turned down our requests for an interview to talk about these trips. Surprised?
Knowing Mike, I'm not surprised. If you take a government job, you are obliged to be transparent. And part of being transparent is to talk with the press.
And that takes us back to that question.
Mr. Peavy? Mr. Peavy, may I get your attention, sir?
After denying a request for an interview, we tried to talk to Michael Peavy.
We're going to clear the room. We could ask them to, that would be great.
After a recent meeting in San Francisco.
Mr. Peavy, we'd like to talk to you about your travel, sir.
So we're clearing the room now. Yeah.
And it's more than just 165 grand. It's also 119 business days away from his office in San Francisco. That's an average of 4 work weeks each year, 4 weeks out of the office to travel the globe. The Public Utilities Commission would not tell us if those days are considered regular working days or vacation days. Bottom line, free travel, days off, all on top of Michael Peavy's $132,000 annual salary.
Is there a point in the near future he'll sit down for a formal interview with us?
There's a point in the near future we'll continue to ask for that interview. If he wants to explain and justify why he thinks it's right, we'll be there.
Okay. You're very persistent. Thanks so much, Tony.
Thank you, Tony.